and welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we are going to start with Chapter 2 for CSS course. In this chapter, I'm going to be teaching you CSS Syntax, and as well, you will be learning about CSS Selectors. Now, if you have any questions at the end of this video, don't forget you can always leave them in the comment section below. And as well, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure to subscribe so you can receive notifications every single time that I upload a video. As well, if you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to get started with CSS Syntax, the first thing that I want you guys to do is to open the index file that we created on the first chapter. Now, I already have this open. As you can see here, this is the welcome page that we created. And I'm also going to open this out with Visual Studio Code because I am going to leave everything in blank right now. Okay, so here is the inline CSS that we used for this example. So I'm going to remove all the style from these HTML document. Okay, I'm also going to remove the H1 and I'm going to save this. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. Okay, give me 1 second here. I haven't hit save here. Okay, there you go. So the site is going to be pure HTML right now, and as I said in the chapter 1, I am going to be using external CSS for this. Okay, so I opened the folder here for CSS, and I'm going to create inside of this folder a new file, and we're going to call it style.css. Okay, I'm going to hit enter, and what we're going to do right now, the first thing we're going to do is link in the head section our style sheet. I bet that you guys know how to do that, so I dare you to do it right now. Okay, if you don't remember how to do it, it's very easy. Quick refresher from chapter 1. You go back to CSS and you go to the how to section, and here is an example of the link you're going to use. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to copy this link, and you're going to paste this into your code. Now the thing that we're going to change is the reference, because it says my style.css, and here we just call it style CSS. So that's what we're going to use. So remember, link, then you need to say that it's a style sheet, and then you have to use the href attribute so that you can go ahead and link the style sheet that we just created, which is open right here, by the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that out. We already have the CSS, the HTML document link with this CSS style. Now let's just go ahead and give it a try. But before I go ahead and actually I give it a try, what I want to do is explain you what is CSS syntax. So let's go ahead and get started with CSS syntax. So for me to explain that, I will go back to w3schools.com, and we're gonna go to the CSS syntax option here in the left-hand side. And as you can see, here is the syntax that we have to use for CSS. Okay, so what is CSS syntax? So the syntax for CSS, it's a rule set which consists of a selector and a declaration block. Okay, so the selector in this case is this portion right here, which it's H1, all H1 tags. Then it has a declaration which has a property and it has a value. Now each declaration is separated by a semicolon. Okay, and as you can see here, we have two, because here we have property and value, then we have the separation of this declaration, and then we have a second declaration which also has a property and a value. And as you can see here, the selector points to the HTML element that you want to style. So the selector pretty much tells CSS, this is the section that I want to give this certain style, right, to it. Then the declaration block contains two declarations separated by semicolons, as I said before. Now each declaration includes a property which in this case is the color, and then the value, like what's going to be the color, right? In this case is blue. Now here we have another example which has a property which is the font size. Now how big is going to be the font size? It says here the value that will be 12 pixels, right? So as I said, each declaration will be separated by a semicolon. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's do that into our external style sheet, so we can go ahead and actually test it out first and see that it works. Now, one thing I want to do here, I am going to copy this H1, and I'm going to do a couple of them. I'm going to do 4 H1 tags, okay? And then I am going to do an H2 tag, and we're gonna say this is an H2 tag, okay? And I'm gonna save this information, and now let's go ahead and get started by selecting all H1 tags, and we're going to select we're gonna give a property, okay? And we're gonna say the property is gonna be the color, and then the value is going to be blue. Okay, now I'm going to save this, and we are going to refresh this because I have added several H1s to this document, and now you're going to be able to see this. So I'm going to refresh. So as you can see, now this has been colored in blue because the selector is only H1. I did not select H2. I did not select P. I did not select anything else. I only selected an H1 tag, right? So that's what a selector is, by the way, but we're gonna get deeper into that in just a moment. So this is the syntax, okay? Remember, 2 curly brackets, one to open and the other one to close. But we start first with a selector, then we open a curly bracket, then we do a statement here. And by the way, let's add another one, and let's separate this by a semicolon, and I'm going to give a space because this is the way that I love to write my code, and many programmers out there will also do this. You can also do it, you know, like right next to it, but I prefer to just simply hit enter and give it a bit of space. Go ahead and do another one. Let's change the font. Let's change the font size, and I'm going to make it small. Okay, I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to refresh and see it made all H1 tags smaller. Okay, so there you have 1 and 2 declarations. As I said before, you can go ahead and you can do this one next to the other one like this, and I'm gonna hit save, and it'll work perfectly fine. When you hit refresh, see, nothing happens because it has that semicolon separating the declaration. Now what happens if I remove the semicolon? I'm gonna save this and I'm gonna hit refresh. Nothing happens. Why? Because I am confusing the code. I am not declaring properly the way that I have to do a declaration on CSS. So the semicolons are very important right after a declaration, okay? Make sure to always write your code this way, either if it's right next to it, but with the semicolon, or like this. I prefer this way. You go ahead and choose what is better for you, okay? Now, as I said, sometimes you can go crazy in your code because it's not working or something, and it's probably because you're just missing the semicolon. So that's very important. That's a very important part in the syntax for CSS. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to hit refresh, and as you can see, it went back to the format that we added there. So that's what the syntax looks like: a selector, a declaration, and it has to have a property and a value. It can be 1, 2, or more declarations inside of this syntax. You can even add a third one, by the way. If you go ahead and let's say that you add a background color, and let's say I'm gonna make this background color, I don't know, let's say black. I can go ahead and actually do that as well. And then I can hit refresh, and you see it adds a background color to each H1 tag. Okay, so I mean, you can add as many declarations as you want, as long as, you know, it's working out for you and it's meeting what you want to show in your website. So again, that is the CSS syntax. If you have questions about this topic, remember to leave them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer those for you. And I'm sorry if I've been very repetitive, but I definitely want to make sure that you guys are clear about this. If you guys can give me feedback as well, I will surely appreciate it. Okay, so let's move on to the selectors, because I already show you guys one of the selectors, which is H1. So let's go to the selector sections, and I'm going to be talking about them. So here we have different type of selectors on CSS, and they are used to find, as I said before, or to select a specific portion of your HTML code and style it in a way that you want. That's why on CSS you have to use a selector to tell CSS, hey, this is the portion of the HTML document that I want to style. Because as you may know, a website is not going to have all of the content in just one color or one font size, etc. Right? So we definitely want to make sure that with a selector, we just select the portion of the HTML document that we want to style. Okay, so there are 5 categories for selectors, and in this video I'm only going to cover simple selectors, but down the road in this course I am going to be talking about the other 4 categories. Okay, because I don't want to confuse you guys into talking too much about this right now, and then you're gonna be all over the place. Okay, we're gonna go step by step. So here are the 5 categories. We have simple selectors, which will select elements based on name, ID, and class. Now we have combinator selectors, which are going to select element based on a specific relationship between them. Then we have pseudo class selectors, which are going to select elements based on a certain state. Then we will have pseudo element selectors, which will select and style a part of an element. And finally, we have the attribute selectors, which are going to select the elements based on an attribute or the attribute value, in other words. So let's go ahead and get started with just the simple selectors, okay? And I'm going to be explaining here on W3 School all the most basic selectors that you will see, okay? So as you saw here in our code, we already used an H1 selector, right? Now, I'm going to be adding a couple of things more to my HTML code here. Actually, I want to add a couple of P tags, okay? And we're gonna add a couple of more H2 tags. And we're probably want to add a division, right? And this div, we're just going to leave it like that, empty. And we're gonna add just a couple of them. Whoops. We're just gonna add 3 divisions right there. And I'm gonna save this. Okay, so so the element selectors are based on the element name or the tag name. Okay, so here are the element selectors. This could be P elements, this could be H1 elements, this could be div elements. Just like this, you see, H1, this could be another selector, which is div, this is another one, which is P. So those are the type of selectors that you will see on CSS element selectors, okay? So an element selector is a selector that will select a portion of HTML which is based on an element name, like the P tag or the P element or the H1 element or the H2 element. So let me go ahead and show you guys a couple of examples, okay? So here we have the style, right? We already told our CSS style sheet that we want all H1 elements to be this certain way. Now we're going to select, I'm going to change, by the way, the font size, just because we want an H1 element to show bigger than the other ones. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is add another element selector, which is going to be the H2 element, and I'm simply going to copy this and I am going to paste it. We're going to add an H2 selector. Okay, and now here we're going to color this in red, and we're going to give a background color of white. Okay, I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to hit refresh, and you see now this is an H2 tag. Now to all H2 elements I am applying this type of this type of style. Okay, so now we're going to do the same with the div element and the p element. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's say div, and we are going to input on the div. And by the way, to the divs, I just want to give a background color so that you guys can see it. A background color, and the background color for the div is going to be blue or blue violet, because what the hell, right? I mean, we can do whatever we want. So I'm going to hit save and I'm going to hit refresh. Okay, now on the div section, as you can see, we don't see the background style that we just added to it, because we don't have any type of information, right, in the division that we just did. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go back to my HTML code, and I am simply going to add an HR here, and I'm going to hit refresh. And as you can see, the HR now it's purple, kind of purple. Okay, so we're going to add a couple of HRs here just so you can see how the background color is changing for all divs. Okay, I'm gonna hit save, and then I'm gonna hit refresh, and there you go. You see all of them are purple. Okay, and now finally we're going to style our p tag. To style our p tag, I'm going to copy this to make it easier, and instead of H2 we're gonna call it P, right? And we're gonna say to P that we want the color to be black. Yes, black. Actually, we want the color to be white instead. Let's just go ahead and input a color white, and the background we're gonna make it black. Okay, there you go. Now we're gonna hit save, we're gonna hit refresh, and there you go. So this is why selectors, element selectors, are very important. As you can see, each one of them are going to give you different type of styles depending upon what you want to do with your code and how you want to style it. Okay, so those are some examples of element selectors. Okay, now let's go with ID selectors. So the ID selectors uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to select a specific element. Watch carefully, this is for a specific element. Now the ID of an element is unique within a page, meaning that you probably want to add or use the ID selector for something that is very specific and it's very unique. Okay, it's not like you are gonna have a whole bunch of groups. It's probably one thing only in your site that you want to style this way, right? So that's why the ID selector is used to select one unique element. Now to select an element with a specific ID, you have to write a hashtag character followed by the ID of the element. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this first on HTML, because to use the ID first we have to create an ID for something. So let's say that for this H1 we want to give this element the ID of you can, by the way, the ID can be whatever you want. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's call this ID let's call it unique. Okay, I'm using this ID of unique. Okay, so to this ID of unique I am going to call it have to call the selector with a hashtag, right? So let's go ahead and use a hashtag, and then we're going to call unique. We're going to open the curly brackets, and we're going to paint this unique element with a color of pink. Okay, and we're going to close the declaration, and we're going to hit save. And I'm also going to hit save here in my code so it can save the ID. Okay, so let's go back to welcome page, and this one right here should change. So let's go ahead and hit refresh. And there you go. You see, even though you have set to your style that you want all H1s to be colored in blue, you have here an ID which is called unique that you want to be colored in pink. Okay, so that's an example of an ID selector. Make sure as well, remember to go ahead and use the ID. You have to declare what's the ID inside of your tags, right? And you also have to use the hashtag to go ahead and actually use this ID selector. Okay, so that's the ID. Now, and by the way, here's a quick note: an ID name cannot start with a number. Very important. Okay, never start an ID with a number, because what we want this is to start with always, I don't know, any type of letters, right? But do not start with a number. Okay, now we have the second, the next selector, which is the class selector. So this is kind of the same way like an ID, but you can use this for several elements, if we may say. So you can select elements with specific class with a period character, and you follow that by the class name. Okay, and the class selector element is going to select elements with that specific class attribute. So let's go ahead and let's see how that works in our code. So let's say, as an example here, you have a couple of paragraphs, right, where you want to give a couple of them the class, a class name. Let's say, let's call it different. No. Okay, let's call it another, whatever, because just another, right? And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do this to a couple of them. So the class is gonna be another for this one, and we're gonna do it to a third one. The class is gonna be another for this one as well. Okay, now we're gonna hit save here, and we're going to call the selector with a period, and then we also have to use the word of the class that we gave to it. Okay, so the word is another, and we're going to color this. Let's go ahead and let's color this in red. Okay, let's close the declaration, and now I hit save here, and let's hit save in my HTML file. Let's go back to the welcome page, and I change a couple of them, and I input the class in actually 1, 2, 3 of them. So you should see them changing right now. So let's hit refresh, and there you go. So see, these are different than the ones that we declare in our style sheet before. We gave to the P a color of white and a background of black. But to the ones that has a class of another will be colored red, talking about the fonts, right? And that's what you can see here. So that's how you use the class element. Now the difference between class and ID is that you use class to select multiple items, and you want to use ID to kind of just select one unique element. Okay, so just remember that. Oh, and another important note here, make sure that your class does not start with a number either. Okay, that's just a general rule. Do not start a class with a number either. Okay, let's go ahead and let's see another one. So the next one that we're going to be taking a look at is the universal selector. So what is this universal selector? Well, you do this with an asterisk, and what it does is that it selects all the HTML elements on the page. Okay, and you can follow the rule below, which is going to affect every single one of the elements on your page. Okay, so here we have a quick example. If you go ahead and you use the asterisk, right, and you want to align everything that we've done here, like all this thing right here, you want to put it center, then you can use the asterisk to make everything, all the elements align to the center. So what we're gonna do right now, I'm gonna show you guys this and how to do this. I'm gonna copy this information and I'm gonna go here. And typically when you are coding in CSS, you want to use the universal selector at the beginning. You use this at the beginning because you want to create like kind of like a rule, and it's not a rule actually, but you just want to tell your code that you want all this entire section to be this way, right? Like all this website should be with all the elements center and this and that, right? So I mean, bottom line, you want to affect all the elements that you have in your website. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm putting here the asterisk, and now, whoops, I'm sorry, I had it copied from the previous side. Okay, now we're gonna say, I'm not going to use the color, by the way. I'm just gonna say to the code, and it's only one asterisk, by the way. We're gonna say to the code that we want all the text aligned to the center. Everything that we've done here, okay, everything should be aligned to the center. So I'm gonna hit save, and we're gonna go back to our welcome page. Now we're gonna hit refresh, and boom, there you go. Now everything, it's aligned to the center. So that's why you are going to use the universal selector. Okay, now let's move on. Let's go ahead and let's talk about the grouping selector. This is a way that you can go ahead and actually group a couple of elements in order to have them have the same style, right? Not with the universal selector, probably you're not going to use it because you don't want to apply this to all the elements, right? But you probably want to do this to maybe an H1, to all the H1 and P tags, but you do not want to affect the divs, or you don't want to affect, I don't know, H2 tags, right? So you can go ahead and you can group the selectors, and you can give them in a group certain style. Now, how do you do that? Well, here is an example of the following code. So here is a quick example. In this page, as you can see, you have H1 and the text aligned to the center, and the color is going to be red for H1. Text aligned to the center, and the color is going to be red for H2. And then for P tags, you're going to have all the text aligned to the center and the color to be red. So as you can see, I mean, all the properties and values are the same in each of these elements. So why don't you just simply group all three of them, and you just tell them to have the same the same properties and values, right? So that way you don't have to write 3 times this thing, and you can just simply do it at once. So that's when we are going to be using the grouping selector, right? If you scroll down, you're going to see this example right here. You can group selectors by using the following syntax, right? You can go ahead and actually use it with, you can group them with a comma, as simple as that. So let's go ahead and let's go back to our code and let's do that. Let's say that now I want all H1, I want all H2, I want the divs. Well, I don't want the divs. Let's say I want all P tags colored in blue and black. And now what I'm gonna do is just remove the P, and I am also going to remove the H2 because I am going to give H1, H2, and P the same property and value. Okay, so I'm going to hit save. We're going to go back to the welcome page, and we should see H1, H2, and P tags all in the same value, except the ones that has a class and ID, of course, because we already changed those. So I'm going to hit refresh, and there you go. You see, now H1 tags are blue with background black. H2 tags are black with a font in blue, and the same thing for the paragraphs. The only ones that are not changed are the ones that has an ID, because we painted those in pink, and also the ones with a class. Now if I remove the class, they will go also to blue and black. So that's how you group selectors. okay, using a comma. To give a quick summary of what you've learned today, remember the syntax for CSS is very simple. It will always contain a selector and is going to be open with a curly bracket. It's going to be closed with a curly bracket, and it's going to contain one or more declarations, which will have a property and a value. Okay, that's the first thing, syntax. And a summary of the second thing that you learned today is selectors. Now here are the examples of the selectors that we use today. We use the class selector, which you use for multiple, if you want to change multiple elements. You can also go ahead and use the ID selector, which is used with a hashtag, not like class, which is used with a dot, right? And remember that you have to put the class and the ID in your HTML code first, so then you can go ahead and you can call it in your CSS code like we did in the example. You can go back in the video and review the examples again. Now we also saw the universal selectors and we saw the element selectors, and also how to group elements, right, using a comma. So I hope that this video was super useful for all of you out there trying to learn web development. This is an amazing journey. I mean, if you have the patience to do this, if you really like this, if you really like programming, this is definitely the right path for you. Technology is changing every single day, and this is going to open many doors for you, and not only for you, but for your family if you go ahead and you dedicate yourself to do this well. Okay, so that was it for this video. I hope that you liked it. Remember, if you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And as well, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure to subscribe. That way you can receive notifications every time that I upload a video. And if this video was useful and you feel that could be useful for somebody else, you can go ahead and also share it with your friends. I will highly appreciate that. Okay, remember once again, if you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comment section below and I will reply as soon as I can. And once again, remember that you can always ask Lixi. Bye everyone, see you again in the next episode.